I uncovered the cursed secrets of a torturer who died crying for mercy in his haunted prison. I never should have opened that door. The moment the cold handle turned, dread wrapped around my chest like a vice. It was a Tuesday. Just another day, another dead-end job in a dusty archive, searching for long-forgotten files about a town few would remember. I was used to the musty scent of old paper, the dim glow of weak overhead lights. But this? This was something else. As I stepped inside, shadows slithered across the walls, dancing in the flickering light. A tooth-chilling whisper grazed my ear, and I froze. Did I just imagine that? The air turned thick and cold, like I had walked into a tomb. My heart thudded in my chest. I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me. The room was cluttered, papers piled high, old wood creaking under the weight of secrets. Faded photographs adorned the walls, faces twisted in agony, eyes wide with fear. I shivered. The chilling story of the torturer echoed in my mind, a monster who ruined lives within these walls, a death lingering like a curse. I crept further in, each step slow and careful. Strange noises creaked in the silence, the sound of something shifting in the dark. A flurry of movement caught my eye. I squinted into the corners, where shadows seemed to breathe on their own. My stomach churned. And then there it was, the faint sound of crying. A soft plea for mercy that twisted my gut. It was almost human, an echo of pain trapped in this eerie space. I looked around, but the emptiness mocked me. Fear gripped me like a vice. Should I run? I took a shaky breath, and the whisper came again, this time louder, more urgent. My fingers trembled as I reached for a dusty file on a rickety shelf. It felt wrong. The cold void of the room closed in on me, shadows shifting faster, as if sensing my revelation. I thought I could hear chains rattling in the distance, the haunting rhythm of despair lingering in the air. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed through the chamber, and I jerked backward. My mind raced, pulse pounding in my ears. No. This wasn't happening. But the feeling, that chilling presence? It was real, undeniable. My legs trembled like jelly. Was it the spirits of the tortured? Or something worse? As I turned to flee, a figure emerged from the shadows. I screamed, a raw, primal sound that echoed in the cold stillness, drowning out everything. Darkness swallowed me whole. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. I forced my eyes open, expecting to see the dimly lit chamber, but instead, I was enveloped in an oppressive darkness that swallowed all sound. My heart pounded erratically, panic clawing at my throat. Where was I? The darkness felt alive, pulsing with a malevolent energy that prickled along my skin. Fear gripped me tightly, yet a part of me knew I wasn't alone. The sensation of being watched enveloped me like a shroud. I dared to breathe, pulling in the stale air that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 forgotten souls. In that abyss, the whispering began anew, faint, taunting. It took me a moment to realize I was still inside the torturer's prison, trapped between time and terror. Help me! The voice was soft, soaked in sorrow, a cry that felt like fingernails scraping against glass. It lured me deeper into my own dread, convincing me to listen as each plea seemed to wrap around my thoughts, intoxicating and horrifying all at once. Was it the tortured souls, or had I awakened something more sinister? I pushed myself off the ground, feeling a chill wash over me as I attempted to orient myself within the void. I could still hear the chains, an insistent rattling now jangling in rhythm with my heartbeat. Each clink punctuated the silence, mingling with desperate moans that swirled around me like fog. I shivered as I recalled the faces in the photographs, twisted by anguish. Compelled by that sorrow, I stumbled toward where I remembered the doorway to be. The shadows elongated around me as if bending to some unseen command. Pressing against the wall, I felt the rough stone beneath my fingertips, cool and unyielding. As I moved, the atmosphere shifted. I was no longer merely in a room, I was in their realm, a place of suffering spanning beyond the veil of life. Help me! The plea came clearer this time, urgent, filled with desperation that seemed to pull at my very heartstrings. I hesitated. What if I could assist them? But what awaited me might be far worse. Instinctively, my hand slid to my pocket, fumbling for the flashlight I had carried with me. A tiny ray of hope flickered within the confines of darkness that I managed to click it on. A beam cut smoothly through the obsidian veil, illuminating fragments of my surroundings. Broken chains lay scattered on the floor like ancient remains. I shone the light toward the far wall, where movement caught my attention. A figure stood, partially obscured by shadows, the same twisted shape that had haunted my vision moments before. "Please, help me," it moaned again, stumbling forward. The ghastly face sneered back at me, a mask of suffering, eyes hollow and mouth agape as though trapped in eternal torment. My throat went dry. This was no tortured soul seeking salvation, this was a creature of darkness, born from the very hell I had unwittingly entered. The chains rattled louder, and I turned to flee, but the shadows enveloped me, dragging my feet with an otherworldly strength. The figure lunged for me, its hands reaching out like skeletal claws, intent on pulling me into its eternal night. "Help me!" But as my back hit the wall, I felt something cold press against my fingertips, the edge of the doorframe I thought I had lost. I swung around, fighting the pull of the shadows, desperate to escape the clutches of the figure now mere inches from my face, a clawed hand grasping for my throat. In a surge of adrenaline, I pushed forward with all my strength, squeezing through the doorway as my heart raced. The instant I broke free, the momentum tossed me into the next corridor, the echoes of despair quieting behind me. I inhaled sharply, my heart drumming a thunderous beat in my chest, but as I stood there, catching my breath, the whispers returned, more insistent, more angry. They filled the air, swirling around like a tempest. I stumbled into another room, the cursed remnants of the torturer's domain. The voices blended into a frantic symphony echoing my own fear. "Help us! Free us!" Behind me, the darkness shifted again, a mass forming. I could feel the air press heavy. Whatever haunted this place was still here, roused to anger by my intrusion. A low growl rumbled through the shadows, vibrating through the floor, warning me of the impending doom. With panic clawing at my insides, I turned to flee once more. But as I raced ahead, the path twisted unnaturally, the walls bending, molding to ensnare me further within this nightmarish chamber. No escape. Just more darkness, more chains, and a chorus of tortured souls closing in, their cries growing ever louder and saturating my mind with madness. And then came the seismic shudder of the ground beneath me. The prison began to quake, the cries crescendoing into a roar. I had awakened something ancient, something vile. As I scrambled toward the flickering light ahead, I felt an icy breath upon my neck, freezing my blood. "Help me or I'll take you with me." The dark reached for me, and with one last desperate glance back, I screamed into the tumult as the shadows transformed, no longer merely tortured spirits, they were hungry, forever seeking a new way to inflict terror. Before I could escape, a cold hand seized my ankle, pulling me down into the abyss. The world around me dissolved into a kaleidoscope of shifting shadow as I was dragged down, the cold grip tightening around my ankle like iron shackles. Panic ignited within me, and I clawed at the stone floor, desperately fighting against the force pulling me into the pit of despair below. The whispers morphed into mocking laughter, reverberating off the walls, drowning out my screams. Join us," the voices chimed, their eerie harmonies morphing into pitiful wails, echoing the sorrow of centuries. The darkness seemed to throb, pulsating with a rhythm like a heartbeat, malignant and ancient. "No! I shouted, wrenching myself forward with one final surge of strength. With an intense effort, I managed to free my leg, rolling away from the grasping shadows and back onto solid ground. I scrambled to my feet, breathless, heart hammering madly. Ahead, the flicker of light offered a meager sense of safety, but the echoes of despair chased me like a ravenous beast. I sprinted down the corridor, each step reverberating in time with the torment surrounding me. The swirling shadows tightened into a tunnel of terror, but this corridor felt wrong. It undulated like a living thing, warping with every frantic step. The very walls seemed to close in on me, breathing as if aware of my presence. With every turn I took, the layout morphed, twisting spaces where none should have been, creating gaps in reality. I felt as though I was going around in circles, beating the same path but spiraling deeper into the nightmare. Then, abruptly, the light flickered and extinguished, surging me into a darkness thicker than before. My pulse quickened as I clawed my way along the walls, feeling the damp stone chill against my fingertips, each step a desperate plea to escape from this unfathomable dread. Suddenly, a low growl rumbled through the void, deep and resonant. It sent ice through my veins. I froze, heart skipping as sweat pooled at my brow. It was near whatever vile entity lingered just beyond my senses, hungry and waiting. I could sense its gaze piercing through the dark, watching, calculating my every move. The whispers returned, filling the space with an acrid scent of despair. "She's ours," they jeered, weaving in and out. "Let her become one of us. Let her suffer." "No!" I cried out, pressing my back against the wall as though it could shield me. In my mind's eye, I could see shadows curling and stretching, forming a grotesque figure that would rise from nothingness any moment. I had to move, I had to find a way out before it found me. I took a deep breath, then pushed off from the wall, my movements frantic yet determined. I rounded the corner, propelled by instinct, and came upon a door, a sliver of promise for escape. Yanking it open, I felt a rush of cool air from the room beyond. The crack illuminated the space, revealing it to be an old storage room, littered with remnants of the past. A fractured mirror, rusted tools, and dusty chains hung from rusty hooks, bearing witness to untold horrors. The trapped soul's cries were now incredibly close, echoing with demanding urgency. In the corner, partially obscured by shadows, an iron-bound chest sat forlornly. Intrigued, I approached it, but with every step, the shadows crept closer, swirling around my legs like hungry serpents, desperate to draw me back. As I knelt beside the chest, my pulse quickened. The air grew thick with foreboding. I hesitated, knowing I was teetering on the brink of something dreadful. I pried it open, and the hinges squealed like a tortured soul, echoing through the room only to reveal the remains of a tattered journal, its pages stained with dark, dried blood, and horrifying sketches. The journal was filled with frantic writings, void of respite, chronicling the torturer's perverse desires and unholy experiments. It spoke of power derived from pain, a gateway to the other side where the boundaries of flesh and spirit blurred into unrecognizable forms. But it was the last entry that sent chills racing down my spine, a desperate scrawl that read, "The price of salvation is blood. They must receive their release through sacrifice." Time warped as I grasped the gravity of the words, feeling as though I were unwittingly dancing to an ancient tune with the foreboding shadows closing in. Before I could fully comprehend the chilling implications, a deafening screech erupted from the darkness behind me, and the growl transformed into a guttural roar. Spinning around, I saw it, the twisted figure emerging from the darkness, its skeletal body half formed from the shadows, fusing the lost souls' faces into an amalgamation of horror. "Your blood will free them," it hissed with a voice that felt like ice splitting through my soul. The door slammed shut behind me, leaving me in an isolated battle of will against whatever horror awaited, the veils of the nightmare unknown stretching infinitely before me. The figure lunged forward, its clawed hands outstretched, a wicked grin spreading across its face, triumphant, hungry. "Help me or suffer eternally," it growled, and as I felt the cold claws graze my skin, my vision darkened, the overwhelming dread choking the last remnants of hope from my heart. And then darkness consumed me entirely, leaving only silence as the prison sealed its fate. I awoke in a vast emptiness, the silence pressing down on me like a heavy fog that obscured any remnants of light. My mind was a fractured mirror, reflecting fleeting images and chaotic whispers, a cacophony of anguish that echoed in the void. For a moment, I couldn't discern where I was. The chill in the air felt both familiar and alien, a ghostly embrace that encircled me. Gradually, my senses began to sharpen. I could taste the metallic tang of blood on my lips, my skin taut with a primal awareness that something lurked just beyond the veil of shadow. I stood, trembling, and instinctively reached out, feeling for the walls that might guide me through this spectral realm. But there were no walls. Instead, tendrils of smoke curled toward me, swirling as if alive, caressing my fingertips with a disquieting familiarity. "Help me!" a whispered plea slithered through the air, echoing the tortured cries that had filled my nightmares. No longer was it the figure I'd glimpsed before, but a human visage twisted in torment, eyes wide with desperation. "You mustn't stay here," it begged, unending sorrow clawing at its voice. "You'll join them. You must leave before the hunger consumes you." I recoiled at the desperation in those eyes, the chest-tightening realization that they were not merely here as specters of the past, but were witnesses, prisoners like I had been, trapped beneath the weight of sorrow and relentless torment. "What can I do?" I managed to ask, my own voice sounding foreign in this spectral realm. It responded with a hollow sigh, as if my question was answered long ago with despair. "Sacrifice," it muttered, fading into a wisp of mist, its essence swallowed by the darkness surrounding me. "Blood is the key. Only through the shedding of your own will you gain freedom." A sudden realization crashed over me like a wave, overwhelming and cold. I felt drawn toward an unseen force, a magnetic pull towards a deeper chasm where the cries crescendoed into a symphony of despair. Reluctantly, I made my way through the suffocating darkness, each footfall echoing like a drumbeat of fate. As I ventured forth, the images of the journal pierced my thoughts, words twisted into my mind like knives. The price of salvation: blood. My blood. Would it be enough to rip away the veil separating me from the living world? The thought both terrified and compelled me. Emerging from the darkness, I found myself in a room, an arena of horror bathed in the pale glow of ghostly light emanating from a central altar. It was smeared with unspeakable stains, a gruesome testament to the agonies it had witnessed. Tattered remnants of fabrics and bones surrounded it, the spectral wails growing ever closer, intertwining with my thoughts, a sinister mockery of the living. At the far end of the chamber stood the twisted figure once again, a haunting silhouette merging seamlessly with the air around it. Its visage contorted with grotesque anticipation as I approached, an inexplicable draw pulling me closer to the altar. "You understand now, don't you?" it hissed, the icy breath washing over me as I stood transfixed. "They are waiting for release, for you." I looked down at the altar, blood-stained and waiting, echoing with memories of the innocent souls who had suffered. Tremors surged through my body as the gravity of my choice pressed upon my heart. It felt like the walls were closing in, urging me to either succumb to despair or take a stand against the unyielding horror. "Do it," the figure urged, its clawed fingers stretching toward me, each digit trembling with impatient hunger. "Offer them release. With your sacrifice, their chains will break." The chamber erupted in a cacophony of howls and cries, the air thickening with desperation. The shadows of the trapped souls coalesced around me, grotesque shapes emerging from the darkness, their mouths open in a silent chorus, urging me towards the ultimate act of sacrifice. I felt a churning in my gut, the shatter of resolve, but as the shadows surged forward driven by years of torment, I knew I had to make a choice. Before the decision fell fully upon me, the tremors of the altar escalated, and a blinding light erupted from it, engulfing the room in a radiant, cruel glow. The tortured visages twitched and writhed, their mouths forming silent screams as the light began to dissolve their shadows. "Join us," they pleaded again, and it was then I realized that the connection between my blood and their release was not merely an offering, but a pact, a bond forged in pain and suffering that held the keys to eternal torment. Just as panic seized my heart, I felt the figure tighten its grip on the edge of my consciousness, whispering promises of eternal connection, eternal purpose, A chance to lead those lost souls into the light or bind them forever in darkness. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the chaos. Sharp and commanding. You don't have to. Don't listen to them. I turned to see a shimmering figure, a silhouette of light and hope, defiant against the overwhelming shadows. You can break the cycle. Don't succumb to their fate. The presence ignited my spirit, but as I took a step toward it, the darkness surged, intense and frenzied. The figure writhed and screeched, its form fracturing as if it could no longer contain itself, hunger transforming into rage. Betray us, and you'll suffer their fate. It howled, a chaotic storm of voices blending with the darkness. My heart raced with terror at the sheer intensity of it, caught between light and dark, sacrifice and salvation. The air thickened with tension. And then, amidst the turmoil, I felt a sudden sharp pain in my wrist, a drop of blood forced out as if responding to the unspeakable terror surrounding me. No! I shrieked, withdrawing in shock as the crackling energy pulsated around me, both the light and darkness seeking my essence, and in that moment of vulnerability, a crack opened in reality, a vortex swirling with the memories of pain, the cries of countless souls rushing forward like a gale into weakness, that I stood on the precipice of all-consuming dread, a single drop of blood hovering before me, the fate of all entwined with my decision. With the sounds of anguish waking into an unending tide, I gasped as the shadows lunged, eager for their final prey, and I had no idea which way it would lead me. Choose! They screamed, and before I could comprehend the gravitas of their chant, everything shattered around me, plunging into an abyss of unknown terror. I was swallowed by the churning blackness, each scream blending into the harmonized chaos that tore at the edges of my sanity. Time twisted, minutes felt like eons, my pulse a frantic metronome thrumming against the oppressive silence of the void. Desperation clawed at me, urging me towards a resolution, yet I remained ensnared in impossibility, teetering on the knife edge of choice and consequence. As I fell deeper, visions bombarded my consciousness, fleeting glimpses of past horrors melded with tantalizing snippets of clarity. Each soul I glimpsed bore a tale of torment, a once vibrant life plucked from existence, spiraled into darkness, each reaching out, shimmering silhouettes of sorrow and regret, their hands passing through the veil attempting to make contact with my flesh. Help us! Their voices called, a hypnotic chant that swelled into an agonizing crescendo. We are suffering. But amidst their pained wails came the shrill echoes of the figure that first beckoned me. Do it. Sacrifice yourself and free them. It cried within the tempest, its voice now a twisted mockery of hope. Your blood will bind you, give power to your spirit. With a jolt, I regained consciousness, my heart racing as I abruptly landed on the cold, stone floor of the altar chamber once more. The altar loomed like a grotesque idol before me, glowing faintly, throbbing with anticipation, and my blood still trickled from my arm where the unseen force had struck me. Your anguish feeds them. The figure loomed closer, its eyes hollow yet brimming with a desire I instinctively recognized. Your despair is a banquet. Relinquish the fear, and surrender. The chilling weight of its persuasion crushed me, an overwhelming urge to obey wrapping around my mind like thick vines. Yet, in the depths of my fragmented thoughts, the luminous figure, the voice of rebellion, flickered like a dying flame. You don't have to be their vessel. Break free. Fight. But how could I fight against the very foundation of their torment? They had glimpsed everything I was, and using the fragile tether of empathy binding me to their plight fattened their whispers, beckoning me ever closer to the altar. It was as if they sensed my hesitation, the anguished shrieks swelled into frenzied howls, the very air electric with their hunger. Relinquish your soul. They chorused, their presence swirling around me like a maelstrom. It seemed to me that the shadows themselves were elongating, stretching and coiling towards the altar as if desperate for the sacrifice they craved. I recoiled, stepping backwards into something solid. Turning, I found myself stepping against a hard, cold, and unyielding wall, a sudden realization hitting me like a tidal wave. The chamber was no longer empty, it was now filled with grotesque figures, their forms twisted and writhing in agony, shadows of the lost souls shackled to this hell. There were faces now, their features contorted into grotesque approval or pleading despair, forming a cavernous gallery of the damned, forever watching. Choose one. The figure insisted, its voice a serpent's hiss. It flickered, visible on the edge of my vision, but when I looked directly, it dissipated into nothingness. You are the key. Give your essence. Embrace this. Fury blazed in the depths of my heart, igniting my spirit to resist. No! I shouted defiantly, grounding myself against the flood of despair. The spirits recoiled slightly, momentarily stunned, and in that brief reprieve, I glimpsed newly revealed shadows lurking behind the outlines of larger, more menacing entities, their limbs elongated and clawed in predatory anticipation. The atmosphere thickened, and the very air began to hum. I sensed a shift in energy as the malevolent force of shadows stirred, the sinister figures whispering amongst themselves, their low rumble growing louder and more ominous, their predatory eyes trained on me, now teetering at the edge of hope and dread. The cries morphed into shrill laughter, a cacophony of derision that caged me in a vice of fear. You will choose. You cannot fight what is destined. And then a horrific sight unfolded as the atmosphere loomed heavier, the threshold of fate spiraling out of control. One soul, previously pleading for mercy, transformed spectrally into a grotesque version of what it once was. Its lips curled into a wicked grin, and it began to stretch, its body distorting and elongating, becoming something monstrous that echoed the shadows, an amalgamation of anguish binding it to the very darkness that surrounded us. Join us, become one of us. It roared with an impossibly deep and guttural laugh, becoming not just a herald of despair, but a vessel of the very torment they sought to ensnare me. In this violent moment, the walls of the chamber began to ripple like a disturbed pond, the flickering specters contorting into forms that were no longer human, visions of twisted flesh and eyes wide open in a silent scream. They hungered for me, they fed on my fear and uncertainty. A deep rumbling tore through the chamber as the shadows surged forward, clawing at my skin, becoming one with my heartbeat, pressing against me with a multitude of cold and malicious grips. My heart labored, drumming a warning against the hurricane of despair, and yet I found myself inadvertently loitering on the brink of acceptance, too terrified to shake off their pleas. And then, piercing through the chaos, a final anguished cry rose above the clamor. You can't trust them. Don't listen. Fight for your freedom. In that split second of clarity that threatened to shatter, I realized I was on the cusp of not just deciding my fate, but perhaps that of the countless souls imprisoned alongside me. And amid the echoes, as shadows and cries entwined, I took a slow, deliberate breath, my mind racing with adrenaline as I struggled against the crushing tide of darkness. Then, from nowhere, a fresh malevolence erupted. The ground beneath me shattered, a rift opening right where I stood, revealing an abyss deeper than the horrors surrounding me. I was falling into the unknown, the vacuum of darkness ready to claim me. And as I screamed, everything spewed forth into chaos, an outpouring of terror that illuminated the depths of despair. I felt the shadows grasping once more, their hands closing in, their whispers screaming words destined to haunt me forever. I was falling, lost in an ocean of suffering souls, their cries enveloping me as I plunged into an abyss that had no end, or did it? The plunge into the abyss was unlike any other experience I had ever known. It was a visceral descent where time lost all meaning, an eternal fall echoing with the cries of those who had suffered alongside me. My body felt weightless, my mind teetering on the edge of consciousness. I could not tell if I was dreaming or if the very fabric of reality was unraveling, each thread pulling at my sanity. The shadows clung to me like a shroud, swooping and swirling, their whispers weaving a tapestry of despair that filled my lungs with an unbearable weight. You are one of us now, they hissed, their voices gleeful and insidious, taunting me with the promise of a fate intertwined with theirs. Embrace the darkness, and you will find freedom. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced, forming a grotesque landscape that stretched endlessly around me, twisted trees with gnarled branches like skeletal fingers clawing at the skies, where storm clouds boiled with a visceral anger. Eurythmic pulsing sounds resonated through the air, like a heartbeat faster than my own, a deep, throbbing pulse that promised pain. That I landed with a sickening thud onto damp, spongy ground, and my heart leaped in my chest, instinctively fighting the suffocating grip of despair. I was within a forest of despair, a forest filled with the whispers of the damned. Here, the spirits materialized before my eyes, their faces painted with agony and betrayal, each figure more twisted than the last as they trembled on the brink of dissolution. Their eyes shimmered with an unmistakable familiarity, revealing the remnants of their past lives, each a reflection of the choices they had failed to make. "Why did you come?" they asked in tortured unison, a chilling melody that echoed through my marrow. "Why do you linger?" A guttural snapping resonated from deeper within the forest, and shadows trickled from the underbrush, crawling toward me with an insatiable hunger. I couldn't shake the belief that whatever lay ahead was feeding on the very essence of my fear and hopelessness. Memory blurred with disorientation, as flickers of the past laughter and love, warmth and safety began to fade. In their place surged a heavy, foreboding presence. "Leave while you can," a new voice rasped, a hoarse whisper full of anguish that sent shivers down my spine as it echoed among the trees. "Or you'll become one of them." Before I could process the warning, the shadows surged, morphing into a grotesque beast, the embodiment of suffering itself, its form a churning mass of painful faces merging into one hulking figure. It towered over me, gaping maw dripping with ichor, eyes filled with a boundless hunger, reflecting back the fear I had tried to suppress. "Sacrifice," it growled, the word reverberating in my chest like a death knell. "It is the only way to traverse this realm. Surrender to me, and I will grant you the answers you seek." The idea was abhorrent, and a fire ignited within me, yet I was frozen in place, the specters of doubt wrapping around me again and again. As I struggled, one of the tortured faces broke free from the thing's maw, a young girl, her features hauntingly familiar. Her eyes, filled with terror yet steady, pierced through the darkness. "Fight!" she cried, reaching out to me, her translucent fingers almost brushing my palm. "There's still time. Don't let him take you." The shadows howled, enraged, their whispers sharpening, demanding vengeance. "You will not defy him." In that moment, clarity struck. This was no mere choice about my fate, the price of my inaction came at the cost of all those souls still lost. They sought justice, revenge, or perhaps something even more that I dared not fathom. My heart raced, blood pounding against my temples as I struggled against the tide of their combined fury. Then, the girl screamed, her voice cutting through the veil. "You must remember," she cried. "Remember the altar, your blood, what you saw." Images flooded back, scenes of crimson that flowed during the ritual, of an unspeakable bond created between life and death. I could feel their memories, their desires, intertwining with my own, a nexus of desperation that ignited something primal within me. "No!" I shouted, forcing myself against the creature, "I will not surrender to despair." In a moment of rebellion, I closed my eyes and concentrated, letting my fear ignite into defiance. My hands flicked, and the air rippled with intensity. I envisioned the altar, my blood pooling against it, how it had been an offering, a marker. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath me, the forest itself seeming to awaken. The shadowy branches began to reshape, and the wailing souls surged forward in a wave of collective anguish, fueled by my newfound resolve. Hope burgeoned against their demands, the chaotic energy intertwining like a flame against the gale, but then everything shattered violently. The creature bellowed, teeth gnashing, the very essence of anguish recoiling in a frenzy. And from the depths of the forest, an unexpected light surged forth, a blinding, searing beacon slicing through the encroaching darkness. "What treachery is this?" the creature shrieked, twisting and writhed as if in pain. As the light blazed, I was torn between ecstasy and fear, realizing I was no longer alone. Something stirred within me, and every ounce of fear became an electric current running through my veins, beckoning me to push forward. But just as clarity grasped my resolve, I heard a slick whisper threading through the air. "You cannot escape the truth," it slithered, chilling my bones. "You were destined to join us." Overwhelmed, I stumbled. The light flickered, and the forest responded, darkness closing in. "Who are you?" I demanded, breath shortening as faces swirled around, their laughter and sorrow echoing in a monstrous symphony. And it happened a sudden rift split at my feet, the shadows recoiled like a beast startled, a gnashing maw beneath me just waiting to devour everything I knew. With my heart in my throat, I felt the ground tremble as the darkness tried to pull me under. I blinked, and in that fraction of a second, I could see faces emerging from the shadows, each one a reminder of the terrible price of choice. With a final lurch, I leapt, driven by a primal urge to evade the insatiable maw awaiting me. But as I fell, the light pulsed and fractured, leaving the forest aglow in an ominous stillness tinged with malevolence. And in that breathless moment, I realized I would not escape unscathed. The shadows composed themselves, and from the depths twisted a figure. I recognized the figure that had beckoned me initially, its smile stretching across its horrendous features, filled with a hunger that now mirrored my own. "Welcome back," it purred, eyes gleaming with a sinister satisfaction. "Let us share the truth you sought so desperately. All of your friends are here, and so are their secrets. Those who scream the loudest have the deepest wounds." My heart hammered as I reeled backward, but it was too late. The shadows surged, a pulse entwining us all in a horrifying embrace, limbs extending and closing in against me as I fought to scream. But the darkness enveloped me, whispering promises of horror and haunting memories that would never fade. And just like that, a new truth unfurled before me, as the darkness finally had me in its unforgiving grip. The air thickened, suffocating and heavy, as I was pulled inexorably toward the grotesque figure looming over me. It was not simply shadows, it was a memory of what I had become, a wraith forged from despair and relentless doubt, and now it reached for me with malicious intent. "No! Get away!" I shouted, as if sheer will could sever the chains binding me to this horror. My heart raced, every beat echoing my panic, each pulse reminding me of life still clinging on despite the forbidding darkness. "Don't you wish to know?" The voice slithered through the damp air, smooth yet tainted with malice. "The answers you seek lie in their betrayal, their cowardice focused within the vessel of truth." In that moment, the shadows shifted, swirling into the forms of those I had known, their faces twisted with agony, each revealing the secrets they had concealed in life. Lovers, friends, all bearing guilt and fear that now manifested in blistering screams. "Betrayal!" they cried, each echo enveloping me like a noose. "This was what you chose. The altar you stood upon, do you see? Our destinies were not bound to your resolve, they were shackled with your every decision." Their pain turned into pleasure, the shadows reflecting in twisted delight at exposing my failures, my sins on display. That I staggered, grappling with their haunting accusations. The realization of the truth crashed over me like a wave. All of them had bestowed their fates upon me willingly, had trusted me to fortify them against that darkness. And yet, I had fallen both for myself and them. One soul stepped forward, a figure I had failed to protect, a friend whose joy had turned into a distant memory against the backdrop of my guilt. "You can save us," it pleaded softly, a voice filled with an ethereal timbre that resonated with the sorrow of all those lost. "But what must be sacrificed has no bounds." I shook my head. The very idea calculation and choice entwined felt like betrayal against the love I still carried for them. "No, I won't give in," I replied, though panic curdled my every thought. "It's too late," the grotesque figure chuckled, its laughter echoing in my bones, sending a chill down my spine. "You grasp the remnants of hope, yet it crumbles in the presence of despair." As it spoke, light flickered like dying embers around me. The trees began to bend as if they spoke with living voices, every branch weaving together a tapestry of pain, orchestrating the furious song of damnation. "Fight back!" The girl's voice rang once more, the familiar girl from my memories. "You must rewrite the covenant established at the altar." Her radiance sparked deeply within, igniting something dormant and furious, a resonance that thrummed with the collective strength of those who had been wronged, those who sought justice over vengeance. I drew upon that energy, letting it cascade through my veins, yet the shadows surged, meeting my defiance with a titanic force, interlacing with serpentine tendrils that bore down upon my spirit like iron shackles. In that critical moment, the world convulsed, the skies darkened, swallowing the last vestiges of light while the breath of the damned filled the silence. "You see," the figure whispered, stepping closer, the familiar warmth of what once was flickered in its eyes, you have powered this darkness all along. It has been feeding upon the dread nestled in your heart, that very fear that chains you to regret and sorrow. But I can still break free. I screamed, shaking feverishly, refusing to yield to the overwhelming sensations threatening to drown me in despair. Suddenly, the ground shattered like glass beneath me, and from that jagged maw a horde of souls erupted, swirling and writhing like a chaotic tempest. I was no longer just a spectator, my essence was entangled within them, drawn into a vortex of memories, both beautiful and grotesquely haunting. Images blinded me, faces of those I had loved and lost, all splintered reflections of what could have been. They howled, a cacophony of voices imploring me, remember us. Fight for us. The shadows twisted, forming into a wall of monstrous limbs reaching for my throat, grasping for my very essence. The torment of their eyes turned into desperation, whispering in longing for liberation and revenge alike. You know how to set us free, strike the altar anew. No. I shouted, clawing at my own despair. I won't sacrifice anyone else. I can't. With a movement that felt instinctual, I thrust my hand toward the crumbling shards of light, willing myself deeper into their grip. If I could rewrite the story, I could face the past with defiance, the walls of regret breaking down as I fought against the behemoth shadow manifesting around me. Just as it felt like the ground crumbled entirely, I glimpsed the light of the altar rising from the depths, its once dim glow bathing the forest in a haunting cadence of flickering hope and relentless despair, electricity crackling with the undeniable promise of liberation. And then everything started to pulse in rhythm, the shadows responding, growing smaller as their cries for vengeance turned to shrieks of rage. Foolish child, you believe you have power here. The price of defiance is steep. Suddenly, I felt a cold hand grasp my own, pulling me deeper into the swirling void. It was her, my friend, the girl who had implored me to remember. Her ethereal smile tore through the chaos, raw with emotion, anchoring me against the oncoming tide of darkness that threatened to swallow us whole. In that moment, with hearts intertwined, we plunged toward the altar, determination radiating from within. But as our hands clasped around its cold edge, the ground split once more beneath us. Reveal the truth. The shadows howled, the beast folding in on itself, its many eyes fixated on me with a terrifying hunger. The altar began to vibrate, the runes carved on its surface igniting with a fiery resonance, and as the light enveloped us, a mandala of souls wrapped around, merging our destinies into a single, pulsating thread. And as we approached the heart of the altar, a voice, a familiar, guttural voice, echoed once more through the void. You cannot outrun your fate. The darkness hungers for you, just as you hunger for the truth. And in that visceral convergence of darkness and light, I felt the swirling energies yet again, memories clawing at the edges of my mind, yearning for unanswered questions, hungering for the truth I had sought. The moment froze, a stillness hung in the air, and then with a violent surge, the ground beneath me heaved, propelling me into a spiraling abyss where shimmering memories began to dissolve in the shadow's grasp. And as I plummeted, tethered to nothing but the echoes of those I had loved, I realized in that final breath of clarity the true horror still awaited as the voices of the lost roared in defiance around me. I had awakened a slumbering darkness that knew my name. The fall felt eternal, time stretching into an agonizing blur as I plummeted through a vast, dark expanse, the realm between existence and oblivion. The shadows rushed past, their whispers coiling around my limbs, each breath becoming heavier as spectral hands reached for my fading essence. I could hear their whispers clearly now, deep, guttural murmurs filled with anguish and longing. Face the truth. You are the architect of your own downfall. They surrounded me, swarming like a tempest, dark tendrils pulling me into the heart of my nightmares. The realization hit me as fiercely as the cold air biting my skin. The truth would not set me free, it would drown me in the very grief I sought to escape. Suddenly, I was thrust into a void filled with images of a grotesque scene. The figures I once cherished were now shackled to the altar, their faces twisted in perpetual agony as each anguished expression bore witness to my betrayal. I could feel their fury and despair clawing at my heart, a chorus of voices harmonizing in torment. Why did you abandon us? You held our fates in your hands. A cold sweat coated my skin as I recognized the altar upon which they were bound, a blood-stained slab of stone imbued with the pain of countless sacrifices, intricately carved with names I had once cherished. Each name whispered secrets to the darkness, tales of suffering begging for redemption, while their energies fed a monstrous entity swirling just out of reach. No. I wanted to save you. I cried, tears pooling in my eyes as the shadows chewed at the edges of my sanity. I never wanted this. Within that cry, I felt a stir of rebellion against the curse affixed upon me, this eternal obligation forged by fear and regrets, but the shadows twisted tighter, conveying a terrible truth. Your desire to save them has only plunged you deeper into despair. You cannot escape, you were always meant to draw judgment. The altar rippled beneath me, reacting to my turmoil, growing in potency as it revealed its own gruesome history. I was no longer an observer. I felt the weight of the altar pressing down upon my chest, a pressure of countless sins waiting to be unmasked. Disembodied laughter erupted around me, cruel and malevolent, punctuating the realization that I was not the first to attempt a bargain with the shadows. No more. I reject this fate. I screamed, summoning what little strength remained, funneling every ounce of resilience into my core. With a fierce thrust, I pulled away from the grip of despair, willing myself to rise above it, to acknowledge the pain while refusing to succumb. Yet as I rose, the altar responded with brutal force. A surge of energy exploded from within it, sending waves of maddening light through the surrounding darkness. You cannot defy the architects of pain. We thrive from your grief. Your very weakness is our salvation. Blistering heat seared my skin, illuminating fractals of truth arising from the depths. The faces of the lost spun around me, their mouths agape in desperate screams. Will you choose your suffering or embrace our make-believe freedom? In that moment of torment, a jarring thought struck me. What was the deeper truth hidden in the shadows? Could there be a glimmer of hope among such devastation? With that sliver of curiosity burning in my chest, I lunged toward the altar's shimmering heart. Each step felt as if I were crossing an invisible boundary where my blood sang with the collective agony of those bound there, yet I pressed forward, desperate for answers. The rumbles of torment behind me intensified as a colossal shadow loomed ever closer, its sinister form drawing strength from my every tremor of uncertainty. Sparks electrified the air, illuminating a path that wrapped itself around the altar like a serpent. The shadows shrieked in fury, their cries churning into a storm. You are forsaking the pact. You cannot discover the truth. You will suffer for eternity. Amid their fury, I reached for the heart, a crystalline shard pulsating with an energy far older than me, connected to the lives it had destroyed and the despair it had wrought. I could sense it shifting, teetering on the brink of revelation, answers swirling as I grasped the cold fragment, pulling it free from the altar's grip. But just as I felt the raw energy surging through me, a furious howl erupted, a presence that felt equal parts ancient and terrifying. You dare grasp at my essence? The shadows contorted, folding inward, and from their depths emerged a figure clad in rags sewn from despair and anger. It bore the faces of my loved ones fused with its own, their eyes blending with the vacuous gaze of a monstrous being whose very essence hungered for vindication. Shadows poured from the corners of its maw, tracing a path to draw me back in, feeding upon the desperate hope blossoming within. No! I screamed once more, tugging fiercely on threads of defiance. As the darkness roared, a heartbeat echoed through the air, a syncopated rhythm that thrummed with loss and longing, a symphony of every soul it had swallowed, promising that even in death, they would always haunt the living. And then, in that quintessential moment of horror, the creature lunged forward, stretching its gnarled maw wide, bearing down on me with an insatiable appetite for my soul. The shadows spiraled to gather around it, forming a terrible vortex that threatened to engulf the very light I clung to, the last vestiges of hope colliding against unyielding terror. Embrace the darkness, or be consumed. It bellowed with a voice forged in sorrow, sending shockwaves through my very being, forcing me backward toward the frigid edge of oblivion. I teetered, the weight of despair crashing down upon me, but amidst that cosmic fear, I remembered every name etched into the stone, their cries, their truth, and I knew, I had to fight, or be claimed by that ancient presence forever. With my heart racing, I pushed against the tide, the very essence of the altar now resonating in my grasp, ready for the ultimate choice, face the abyss or forge a path illuminated by the truth yet unseen. And as I prepared for a desperate stand, I glimpsed a face in the shadows, one that had never truly left, watching, waiting, yearning for my decision. A ghost of my past, whose fate would seal my own, forever entwined in horrors yet to come. As the monstrous figure lunged, my heart thundered against the walls of my chest, each beat a drum echoing the chilling reality of my choices. The gnarled maw of the creature promised an end, a terrifying embrace, a final surrender to the darkness that whispered seductively in my ear. But something within me snapped. The desperate plea of those trapped alongside me surged forward, igniting the last vestiges of defiance. Drawing strength from the crystalline shard in my hand, I focused on its pulsating energy. My resolve wavered for a split second as I met the gaze of the horror looming above me. It wore the faces of my loved ones, now interwoven with sorrow's dominion, and I felt the weight of their anguish pressing against my own. "Forgive me," I whispered, my own voice trembling as I raised the shard aloft. The air crackled with an intensity that had not been there moments before. "No!" the being howled, the mixture of human sorrow and otherworldly rage swelling. A gust of shadow erupted from within it, slashing through the air like blades, barely missing me, but splintering the altar behind. The ancient stone cracked, groaning under the pressure of dark forces unleashed. I could hear the tortured screams morph into shrill cries of joy as fleeting glimpses of my past flickered like distant stars, beckoning me to remember who I once was. "Face your truth!" it screamed, twisting and morphing, shadows writhing around it. I hesitated, guilt clawing at me like a beast desperate to reclaim its prey. For a solid heartbeat, I teetered on the brink of despair, wondering if perhaps this was my destiny. To become one with the darkness and share in the injuries of those I had lost. But as their faces swirled before me, I felt their disappointment seep into my soul, their yearning for something greater than vengeance whetting the edge of my fear. "No," I rasped, forcing my voice to rise above the chaos. "You will not extinguish our light. We are more than this agony, more than your vessel of despair." Channeling that indomitable spirit, I thrust the shard down, slamming it into the ground with all my might. A shockwave pulsed from the point of impact, spreading outwards, distorting the very air, cooling the flames that had roared around me. The shadows screamed, contorting and writhing as if stung, falling backward into the vortex. For a moment, it seemed that perhaps I had grasped the fragile thread of hope, yet the being responded with fury unmatched, its hair-raising howl resonating through the void, a thunderous cry that rattled the fibers of reality around us. The ground trembled beneath my feet, and in that disturbance, the altar splintered wide, revealing a gaping maw of darkness beneath it, a portal to a realm so filled with sorrow, it threatened to choke the very air I breathed. "Foolish child! Do you not understand?" it yelled, the words laced with a sharp, mocking tone. "Here, you will discover the truth you seek, buried beneath festering wounds of the past. You, too, will join the countless souls who have dared to challenge me." The shadows surged back, rallying, and in that instant, I felt them pull at my essence, digging deeper, grasping for my memories, slicing through the fragile scaffolding of my will. Each soul I had abandoned, every moment of dread carved into the tapestry of the void, echoed in agony. Their voices melded into a torrent that threatened to drown me, weaving tales of despair that threatened to consume me whole, and yet, amid the cacophony, a familiar resonance pulled me deeper into the chaos, a voice that shot shards of warmth through the freezing chill surrounding me. "Find me," it called, soft yet unwavering, cutting through the noise to reach the core of my being. Was that? Had they returned? I strained against the dark hold, clenching the shard tightly as the heart of its energy swirled with nascent hope. "I will find you," I pledged in fierce determination, even against the backdrop of destruction, but before the words could settle, the whirlpool of shadows convulsed violently, promising vengeance for my insolence. "You think a simple conviction can hold back the entropy? Think again." The obsidian maw of the grotesque being widened, revealing a darkness so thick and oppressive it shimmered with dread, ready to draw forth my very essence. With a pulse of adrenaline coursing through my veins, I hurled myself towards the portal, feeling the energy of my shattered past converge in a single moment of clarity. Gritting my teeth, I soared into the darkness like a comet, the crystal shard blazing a trail of light behind me, an ember of resistance against impending doom, but as soon as I crossed the threshold into the abyss, the world collapsed around me. A blinding light flashed, and suddenly, I found myself in a distorted reflection of the life I once knew. The walls of my childhood home towered over me, but everything was askew, warped, twisted by the memories embedded in the dark. Who was I now in this mirrored existence? The whispers returned, not a chorus of anguish but something more sinister, calling names once sweetly cherished, now dipped in shades of warning. You seek the truth, but it lurks in the silence, the moments unspoken, the dread you dare not confront. Before I could respond, glimmering figures began to emerge from shadows, familiar yet distorted individuals I thought lost, their faces shrouded in an irrepressible gloom. Stripped of their former warmth, they eyed me with a mixture of longing and accusation, lips curled into silent pleas that spoke tenfold volumes. Will you join us, or will you witness us as a ghost of what you could have saved? The question echoed with finality, sharp as a knife, cutting through my defenses. Just as I took a step closer, desperate to reach for them, I was seized by an icy grip and spun around. There it was, the towering figure that had chased me through the void, hungry and relentless. Your time is up. It roared, its grotesque visage morphing into something grotesquely familiar, and in that horrified moment, a revelation struck me, one that shattered my very will, the realization that this creature was not simply a manifestation of my deepest fears, but something much more intimate, an echo of my worst nightmares transformed into flesh, set my heart racing. In the darkness of self-loathing, I confronted myself, the essence of my past crashing down around me as the horror of my mistakes materialized before my eyes. Unnerved, I retreated, but there was no escape from the truth burrowing inside, fastened to the very essence of my being. Face every shadow, or be swallowed whole. Screamed my own voice, reverberating against the walls of reality as chaos folded in on itself, the revelation of doom tougher than any false narrative that could comfort me, and as the truth came crashing down, draping its chilling shroud across me, the figures around me began to chant in an echoing harmony of anguish. I could feel their sorrow urging me deeper into the abyss, a desperate call that could not be silenced. Find us, they pleaded in a haunting symphony, their outstretched hands reaching across the void, with the gaping maw of the being still hovering behind me. I took a breath, steeling myself, gazing into their eyes, into the flickering light of hope buried beneath their despair. They were more than memories, they were the agony I longed to lay bare. The shadows twisted, tightening their grip, a whispered promise of unraveling darkness, an invitation that was impossible to refuse. The path ahead shimmered with darkness and danger, a choice that carried unimaginable stakes. Would I succumb to this infinite well of sorrow, or could I unearth something greater, a power born from the truth I had long evaded? With my heart pounding in my chest, teetering once again on the brink of everything I had lost, I realized that the choice before me was not merely of life or death, but of acceptance and reclamation. And just as I stood at that precipice, ready to confront the shadows of my past, a scream pierced through the chaos, the sound of a name so precious, once thought lost. To the depths of despair. Mom! I gasped, as the darkness surged to envelop me, pulling me back into oblivion and trapping my heart in a brutal reality of unbearable choice. The tears stung as my world tilted dangerously, the shadows drawing closer, their whispers intensifying as the very fabric of my existence threatened to tear apart. My breath quickened, time slowing against the inexorable pull of fate, leaving me to face the revelation that lay ahead. And suddenly, I understood. The cries of the damned faded into a chilling echo, and I was left hanging on the edge of the abyss, poised to embrace the void or become its ultimate savior. With a final effort, I prepared to leap into the darkness, as the shadowy specters reached out, urging me to come closer. Join us! The chorus chanted, thick with longing, one voice rising above the others, desperate and familiar. And as I took that fateful step into the sprawling depths, it was their desperate plea that drove me on, a haunting call that could ignite a horrifying legacy, forcing me to finally confront the darkness that had claimed them all for far too long. I crashed through the veil of darkness, spiraling toward the grotesque altar surrounded by shadows that pulsed and writhed like a monster feeding on despair. The cries of the tormented echoed around me, faces distorted in an eternal sigh, their eyes glistening with anguish reflected in my own. Closing my eyes, I conjured the vision of my childhood home, a memory ever fading, the warmth of laughter mingled with the chill of loss. Find us, the voice beckoned again, the familiar whisper of my mother, her love intertwined in the echoes that wrapped around my heart. You have to face the truth. My heart raced as the monstrous being anticipated me, its jagged teeth gnashing in delight at my resolve wavering. You will join them, you are one of us. It hissed, a duality of a voice that I now recognized as both terrifying and familiar. No! I roared, wielding newfound determination. My grip tightened around the crystalline shard, and I focused on every moment of warmth from my past, the laughter, the sunny afternoons, the moments of joy that fought against the suffocating darkness spilling all around me. As I hurled the shard toward the altar, brilliant light exploded forth, illuminating the chamber and revealing the tortured souls bound to the surface. Each face twisted in silent agony, whispering their stories woven into one, entangled in the web of my choices and their tragedies. A piercing scream erupted as the light erupted, blinding the shadows that shrieked and recoiled. Each anguished face strained against the bindings, the chains dissolving as the energy crackled through the air. With a flick of my wrist, tendrils of light sprung forth, forming a shield against the encroaching darkness. You can't escape me. The behemoth growled, the shadows thickening, but I pressed forward. The light cascaded against the creature, repelling its touch, and I saw clarity glimmer in the eyes of the imprisoned, hope emerging from the depths of anguish. A wave of liberation rushed through me, each soul unleashed whispered encouragement, propelling me into the heart of the shadows that had long since claimed the innocent. Face your truth. They chorused, weaving together the threads of sorrow and courage. Every flicker of warmth countered the freezing grip, pulling me deeper into despair, yet, as if responding to their encouragement, the shadows twisted, forming a monstrous visage, fingers like twisted branches reaching for me, sharp and hungry. I will take everything from you. You will know nothing but despair. It roared, the weight of its fury crashing like a tempest. I took a shaky breath, straining against the weight of its darkness. I've lost enough. I shouted back, the pain driving energy into my veins as a radiant pulse streamed forth, bright and pure. In that moment of defiance, I felt every ounce of guilt and regret ignite, and I hurled it toward the altar. The impact sent a shockwave through the realm, an explosion of light that shattered the very confines of my heart. I could see it, my mother's face appeared in front of me, luminous and filled with love. You're stronger than you believe, my child. Release them, and heal. The clarity overwhelmed me, and the chamber shuddered with renewed energy. The longing of the trapped soul surrounded me like an embracing tide, wrapping around the cold depths of my own despair. Their faces swirled, their identities converging within me, each story a thread in a tapestry far grander than the pain. Suddenly, the shadows shrank, recoiling at the brightness, and I felt it, an insatiable hunger clawing at my spirit, willing me to succumb. You think you can defy what I am? The creature bellowed, the voices merging in its wake, rising and curling like smoke, fading into nothingness. Watch me. I cried into the tumult, focus sharpened on the radiant heart of light. The altar vibrated with power, absorbing my resolve and allowing the magic within my blood to increase, igniting the shadows in a violent storm of chaos. Endless night is my gift. It shrieked, but the strength of my resolve shattered the darkness. One by one, the souls surrounding me severed their binders from darkness, reaching for the light, hope emanating from every whisper. Thank you. We are free. Their voices rose in a chorus, casting luminescence across the darkness like a shattering dawn. Then the unthinkable occurred. With the surge of hope, the darkness transformed, revealing the truth wrapped within. The figure of my past, my mother, emerged, her face both angelic and sorrow-worn, glimmering like a beacon against the remaining shadows. You have done well, my brave child, she whispered, arms open wide. But then, her smile twisted, eyes narrowing. Yet, you must know this truth will haunt you. Instinctively, I stepped back, dread pooling in the pit of my stomach. No, I want to be part of your torment. I shouted, but a chill washed over me as the shadows shifted, merging with the light's radiance. Your choice: salvation or despair. Choose to remain with us, to become one with the darkness. Or her voice wavered, to leave the remnants of light behind. The intrusion pulled me deeper into the heart of darkness, a siren's call promising validation and acceptance. Choose. Echoed through realms beyond. And as the temptation of surrender clawed at my heart, a sharp clarity sliced through the haze. I saw the consequences of my submission, not just for me, but for those once lost, now free yet fraught with lingering darkness. Throwing my head back, I let the grief spill from my heart, a final release. I will not give in. I will carry the truth, no matter how grim. And with that, I reclaimed the heart of every lost soul around me, binding it to me as I surged against the elemental force of shadows looming. They roared in rage, and I felt their touch pulling at my essence, but I fought back, wielding fury anew. The altar trembled violently as a rift opened wide beneath it, revealing the shadow beneath, the depths of despair threatening to consume us all. But with every flicker, the glowing heart of light surged with power, emanating bright warmth across the darkness surrounding me, pushing back the oppressive weight like a tide. As the threshold to oblivion receded, I saw the blighted figure transform and shift, merging all the hauntings I had recognized into one wretched visage. In that instant, dread filled my heart, a primal understanding of the darkness that lingered behind the veil. It wasn't merely a haunting, it was the vestige of my choices, the fates tied to my heart. Not one of us was ever meant to bear this alone, I mesmerically replied, letting the bond tether me to every remnant of the past. We are all fragments of a larger tale. You are not just nightmares, you are my memories. And I will carry them forward. The shadows writhed, pausing momentarily, as if beguiled by the potency of my declaration. With that pledge launched into the depths, I felt the ripple of energy flicker outward, reconfiguring the ground below, illuminating the cavernous darkness with a shard of hope from within. The shadows wavered, chomping at the light, yet finding no purchase. No. The being roared, desperation clawing at its voice. You cannot defeat what resides in your soul. With one final thrust of will, I severed the ties that bound every dark memory, tearing apart the twisted fabric of despair. Light poured forth from me as I fought through the storm, illuminating the shadowed corners filled with ashen souls, all screaming their last, trapped visions replaced by incredible warmth. As every shadow melted away into effervescent sparks, I beheld the truth in all its pristine agony. My decision shattered the curse of despair, ripping through past pain into freedom for all those bound to darkness. And before I could breathe in the certainty of liberation, a final whisper caressed my ears. Beware, darkness is patient. It will seek another gateway, a warning lingering at the back of my mind, but I would not yield. I was the keeper of our memories, steeped in the rich blend of love and pain, witness to what was lost, now shaping into something new. The shadows would linger, yes, casting remnants of doubt, but I emerged standing amid the glimmering dawn, reshaping my destiny with every heartbeat, and in that haunting stillness a soft echo, chill against the air, we will find you again. And somewhere deep within, I knew darkness was not done with me yet.